Hello, my name is Penn Miller, and today I'll be your host. Action RPGs often have multiple roles that a player can fill in order to enjoy the game. Some characters specialize in ranged abilities to whittle down foes from afar, while others might want to focus on more durability and protection to soak through damage. From Software's Bloodborne forgoes defensive and ranged options within their game. Bloodborne's combat focuses around aggression, but not a mindless swinging of blades, more of a calculated precision. Bloodborne is able to guide players into an aggressive playstyle by rewarding the player during the fray of the battle, and removing traditional defensive options. Despite this, there is no correct way to play any video games out there. If a game tries to railroad the player into one specific style with no other options, I would declare that as poor game design. Bloodborne slightly edges towards the lines of railroading, but through doing so, it enhances the mechanics and processes in the game. According to the Fexture Life Bloodborne wiki, there are only 2 shields within Bloodborne. One isn't even attainable within the base game, only being available to the player within the Old Hunters DLC. The only shield within the base game is the wooden shield, and its description reads, "Shields are nice, but not if they engender passivity." Bloodborne itself pokes fun at the use of shields within the game. The lock shield is the other shield found within the DLC, and it isn't much greater either. According to the description, the lock shield greatly reduces all forms of non-physical damage, with shields commonly blocking melee attacks in real life and history. This again is ironic towards the use and design of shields within Bloodborne. Unlike its predecessors, such as Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne discourages the use of a shield, as they are a game mechanic that it commonly provokes passivity. Similar to shields, Bloodborne only has one bow. It is available within the Old Hunters DLC, and also functions as a melee weapon. It is interesting to note that Bloodborne does offer defensive options within the game, but most of it's locked behind a DLC. So you can only access these after you complete the main game. This tells me that the developers at From Software thought Bloodborne would be more enjoyable in a feverish melee brawl rather than a turtling fight behind shields or cover, which is typically how their games play out. Bloodborne also has guns, of course. Guns are a commonplace within Bloodborne and yield benefits much more remarkable than those attainable with a shield. While the majority of firearms do not deal serious damage or have an extensive range, they give the player an option to parry. If the player fires their gun, interrupting an enemy attack, it staggers the enemy, thus opening them up for a visceral attack, which deals a lot of damage. If the player is too far away from the enemy, they won't even have enough time to approach and trigger the visceral attack. Even if the player can parry with their gunshot, they still have to be within striking distance to perform a visceral attack. It's a very risk-reward system. A mechanic called the regain system. The regain system occurs when the player taking damage reduces their health. If the player damages an enemy after being hurt themselves, they will recover a portion of the health lost. This system engages players in trading patterns with enemies, as well as other players in PvP. Exchanging hit for hit in a furious battle, only for the player to heal with each strike they land, is... it's an amazing concept. I really like it. By removing classical defensive options and encouraging players through mechanics, From Software's Bloodborne expertly builds a game that engages players through its combat. Now, onto a different topic. I'd like to talk to you about female representation within Bloodborne. From Software's Bloodborne depicts women through narrative space. Narrative space as defined by professor of media studies at Georgia State University, Ashley Jones, is the space of the game that contains the narrative arc or story, characters or avatars, and the objectives of the game. Within Bloodborne's narrative space, there are many women with a trait that they all hold in common. That trait is one of a caregiver, often twisted to fit the game's grotesque narrative. An example of this twisted trait can be seen with the character, Eileen the Crow, a personal favorite of mine. She fulfills the caregiver trait in the form of a fellow hunter, but paradoxically holds the duty of eliminating hunters just like the player. She only survives if the player acts as a caregiver towards her, and that doesn't last very long, as she is destined to die and the player is destined to fail. No storyline exists where Eileen outlives the player. Another interesting thing to note is the traditional storytelling versus storytelling in games. Shira chess, in the queer case of video games, informs of game narratives of having multiple climaxes, unlike the traditional single climax storytelling most commonly present within modern-day media, such as cinema. Bloodborne is a perfect example of a game with multiple climaxes, with many boss fights weaved upon the tension of the game space. All in all, I hope you have enjoyed your time here, and I bid you a fond farewell.